So hey, my name's Riot Rainslate. I am a gameplay capture artist for Riot Games, and I'm going to walk you guys through a simple shot using League Director. So the shot that we're going to go for during this tutorial is going to be like a simple rotation kind of camera move, and I'll put that in front, probably right here, just to show you guys where we're going to aim for. Idea being that like this is something that everyone has access to if you've played a game of League of Legends is 5 people spawning into red base. So you just go and download your game, launch it, and launch League Director, and you'll be in a similar space as me. You may not have the same characters, but that's fine. We're really just looking for the move overall. All right, so I've reset the game to 000, and now we can get started. So first things first, we're going to hit our backslash key in order to switch to the FPS camera. That will allow us to move around the world and look and kind of set up our shot. And then we're going to navigate down to where we want to be. So again, the idea of this shot is a like simple rotation. Maybe we'll go around a little bit farther. Maybe we can use these pillars to wipe. We'll find out. But um, actually, let's play forward a little bit just so these guys spawn in so we can get a good look and a good angle set up. Yeah, it looks pretty good. It's kind of low to the ground. Or maybe actually you can go a little bit lower. Right here, you don't want a Nivea blocking Victor. But yeah, no, this looks a good starting point. But looking at our area, um, looks like our geo looks pretty good. The only concern that I have is there's a lot of areas where I need skybox, and then there's this plane down here. And actually taking a closer look at that, and give me a second, I'll speed up our camera move speed so we can. It looks to be part of the geo of Summoner's Rift. Now, if you've played League of Legends before, which I'm sure all of you have, the game's supposed to be viewed like this, right? There's not really any reason to break the camera in any way. So we only render the things that you'll be seeing from this angle, including kind of the edge of the world over here. But as soon as you break your camera using backspace, or sorry, backslash, you can kind of see where everything breaks down. So if we're going to be shooting from this angle, we're going to need to do something about this wall. But let me turn back the camera move speed. And luckily, this is the first tab we're going to be going to. So first tab you should be opening up when you're about to do a move is the rendering tab, because this sets the feel and the look of your camera and your environment. So um, field of view is probably the first one we're going to look at, and we're going to keep this at 40. If you want to, you can go ahead and what this does affects zoom, so you can zoom in or have a longer one for a wider lens like that, and you have a super wide lens. But for all purposes right here, we're just going to keep this at 40. Next thing we're actually going to look at is nav grid. We'll come back to near clip and far clip later. But yeah, nav grid. So in our game, again, because it's meant to be viewed down from kind of more this angle, our characters hover a little bit off the ground, so they don't clip into the ground. But when we're like in these cinematic angles, we don't want our characters to float. We want them to actually be on the ground. So by changing the nav grid to like -5, or I think -7 is actually usually pretty good, and hitting play, our characters will snap to the ground. All right, so now our character's on the ground. Next thing is our skybox. So let's get rid of all this black. Go ahead and click on your skybox dropdown and pick a skybox that you like. I think I'm going to go with Cloudy Sunset. It's like one of my favorites. And as you can see, it fills the world with light. But the problem is, I think I want this part over here. This is way too blue. I like this kind of tint. So let's go back to our angle we had set up about here. And let's start messing with our rotation and our offset. So rotation, let's set this to, let's try with 99. Oh, wait, that worked out pretty perfectly. Yeah, you can adjust it if you want. You can use these arrows, or you can just type in a number. But I think I kind of want it, so let's go about here. Have the sun kind of peeking through here. Even still though, that's a bit too high for Summoner's Rift. So I'm going to lower that down as well by messing with the skybox offset. So let's start moving this down. It's pretty small actually. Let's go for negative 200. Oops. Put negative in front of that. There we go. Yeah, it looks good. But as you can still tell, there's this really this geo's in the way. So we're actually gonna go back to our near clip and far clip. And what these do is this is like where the camera actually renders. So you're saying, so what near clip's saying is that if you are within, you can kind of see us on Nivea right here. If you kind of clip into a Nivea, it stops rendering her. And the same goes for the far distance. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna lower this down. We're gonna lower this down to, let's say 5,000. So now this is being rendered, the platform and everything like that, but as you can tell, until we get closer, this stops being rendered until it hits 500 units away. Now this is useful if you're doing a shot like this, because as soon as you turn around to Summoner's Rift, boom, half of it's gone. But it does help your frame rate and it does help your rendering, so it's a cool trick you can use to get rid of the things that you don't want to see. But yeah, now we've got that set up. I don't think we're going to be using depth fog and height fog. I might go over those in another video, but we're definitely going to be using depth of field. So usually during my shots, I usually keep it off while I'm just setting up the camera move, because it's kind of a pain to start messing with your field or depth of field and messing with your camera positioning at the same time, especially if your camera positioning is not 100% like sure, or if you have things that are subject to change. So, and then the other thing is like everything becomes a bit blurry, um, and because you're not really doing it yet, you're not really adjusting for depth of field. So for right now, we're going to keep this off, but we're going to come visit this later. All right, now we're happy with the feel of our area. I like the skybox. I'm liking our characters actually on the ground. It's time to switch over to the timeline tab. Now, first thing we're going to do is create a new sequence. Let's name this spawn rotation, or red spawn rotation. Be a bit more organized. And click enter. Cool, so it gives us a blank slate to work in. As you can see, we're at 6 seconds in. That's where our timeline reflects. But first thing we're actually going to do is go all the way back to 0, 0, which will push us to 1. And we're going to put keyframes down for everything we just changed in rendering. So that would be things like, oops, I just opened everything. That would be things like the skybox rotation, the skybox radius, our near clip and far clip, our nav grid, and the other one you actually want to do is depth of field enabled. Now I know we haven't enabled it yet, but it's good to put one down. So if you're planning on having depth of field. All right, so now we've got everything set up. Let's get started with our move. So first things first, we're gonna go and figure out when these guys actually spawn. I think it's sometime around 4 seconds, but let's just be safe. So I'm going to go and lower the speed to, let's lower it to half, and actually let's use this. Now let's go ahead and move this to, say 3 seconds and see if they spawn in. Nope, so it's probably about around 4. So let's click play. All right, 4 seconds. So I just paused when Anivia spawned in. So we know it's around 4 seconds. Let's go back. We'll give ourselves a little bit of leeway here. So we'll move the camera. We know Anivia's going to spawn right here. So let's move the camera into a position and add our first keyframe. So I have mine set up so that F8 sets the camera position, camera rotation, and field of view. You can also set these by clicking on these buttons here or setting your key bindings to be exactly that. So it would be these 3 right here. You can also keyframe speed, keyframe depth of field. It's really up to you. Okay, so there's our first keyframe. So we're going to go ahead and click play. As you can see, the timeline moves alongside the game. So now when an spawns in, we can move our camera and be somewhere about here. Go ahead and click F8 or whatever your keyframe button is to add more. And then we'll do it again. So those guys spawn in. Plan is to be right about here. And lastly, so actually I let that one slip a little too much, but it's okay. So we're going to go to here, add our last keyframe, and let's take a look. So the two ways you can really play your sequence are you can either click play sequence, and what it does is brings you back to the first keyframe and then plays through your sequence. Or you can uncheck this. You can hit apply sequence and then go anywhere you want. So you can go to the front or you can go like to the middle and then click play up here and it'll play where you left off. It's actually such a big help to be able to just go to a moment and be like, I don't know if this is really working. Let me just look at it like 4 or 5 times and see what I can do about it. So, um, one other thing is if you have the apply sequence button up here ticked, you will not be able to move the camera. It will just snap back to where you are. Now this is because it's trying to like do its best not to like mess up the move, and it's like actually rendering this in real time. So um, to move your camera again, just uncheck that apply sequence button, and you can move around freely. So looking at the sequence again, it seems like this move is pretty good. Then it speeds up kind of drastically and then slows down too much. So what we're actually ended up doing is moving these keyframes over. So there's a few ways we can do this. The first way we're going to do it is actually we're going to keep our sequence applied. We're going to move to here, and we're going to use left shift plus our left mouse button to select all of these keyframes. Then we're going to use our left mouse button to drag these keyframes into a position that we like. As you can see, it actually dragging the keyframes. If your timeline is in the middle of your keyframes, it will affect the camera in real time. So it can give you a really good sense of like where you want to be for this shot. It really helps when you're doing like more intricate moves, but just for this, we kind of want these to be pretty evenly spaced. Let's see how this looks. All right, still a bit fast, but we can move that around. There's a bit of a jump there, but it's not too bad. For this presentation, I think it's probably fine. If you want to spend a little more time easing out and like making your move a little bit more smooth, you can. The best ways to do that are either add more keyframes or just again fiddle with the time. All right, so we're pretty happy with this. I like the rotation, I like the move. I'm saying it's uniform enough. Now what? Actually, this one could be a little bit more. There we go, that's probably fine. So we've got a move that we like. Next step is to actually look at our blending options. So what blending options are is something we've added into this where you can affect how the keyframes interact with each other. Um, so what we're going to do is we're going to select this set of keyframes right here. And what this does is it affects these keyframes over here. It affects this path pretty much, more or less, this bit right here. Oh, I almost forgot. A couple of things with the timeline. Zooming in, you can use your scroll wheel to zoom in and out, as well as your right mouse button to go right and left. If you zoom out too far, your keyframes actually will begin turning red. That's not a bad thing. That just means that there's two keyframes there. This also means that like it's more of a warning system of like, hey, there's two things here. Just be aware that's how your move is being affected. Um, yeah, but anyways, back to blending options. So idea of blending options is that your keyframes will be affecting. If you change the blending options of this one, it'll affect here. If you change the blending options of these ones, it will affect this one, and so on and so forth. So to change your blending options, go ahead and select all the keyframes you want to change, and then go down here to your blend. Now, there's about 16 different types of blend. I don't even know how most of them work. I think it's going to require a lot of experimentation, but it just interprets differently. One that is pretty interesting is smooth step. Now, what this one does is, while before, and I'll go to linear to show the difference. Before, it would just be one smooth move, or smoothish move. What smooth step does is that it makes it so it stops here pretty drastically. So as you can see, it kind of like rubber bands a little bit. And you can do that to all of your keyframes if you like. You can do to this one too. So that will go here, stop, go here, stop, go here, stop. All right, so I actually kind of like that. I think it's kind of interesting. So what's next? So next we're going to take a look at depth of field. So luckily, not luckily, we planned for it. We have this keyframe here that already enables depth of field. So we're going to go ahead and click on it and then click the value section on. So it's a bit hard to see, but you can kind of begin to tell. And the background is that it is starting to get out of focus, but we can do better than that. So let's unapply our sequence and I'm going to give you a quick crash course in depth of field. You can tell from over here. So one of the best ways to view depth of field is actually by going back to the rendering tab and going to your depth of field and clicking depth of field debug. Now what this does is applies a filter to your game that shows you what's in focus and what's out of focus. And let me address this a little bit more just to show what I'm talking about. All right. So with a wider depth of field, you can kind of see the depth of field debug shows you what's in focus and out of focus. The black is what's in focus, and as it gets more white, it becomes more out of focus until it's out of focus completely. Sorry for the jump, I had to reset. But back to depth of field. So depth of field works by changing these values over here. So depth of field circle affects how much depth of field, like how much like blurriness there almost is. I can show you by changing this to a drastic number. You can see it gets way more blurry the higher you go. Usually we try and keep this below 20, but there have been instances like with Zaya or Kaisa where we like really ramped it up to add a really cool like kind of out of focus dramatic effect. Depth of field width, I'm going to turn this back on real quick. Width affects how wide your depth of field is. So by hitting this, making this bigger, you can see the amount this that is covered changes. The near is how close to the camera, like how close your fall off begins. From near we have mid, and mid is where this middle line is. It's like where exactly is the middle of the width. And then far is how long it takes to fall off. So with a shorter far, you could get it closer. I can change this to, let's say, 3000. Yeah, you can see it falls off way quicker. I have a really terrible diagram, which again actually kind of helps. Let's see, is that showing? Yeah, one sec. So a good way is this one is near. This one is both width and medium, because medium is where exactly that is. And then this one is far. It's how long it takes to fall off. So by using these tabs, you can go ahead and put your shot into focus. All right, so let's take a look at depth of field for our shot. First things first, let's check at depth of field enabled. It looks like it's still checked, so we're good to go. Next thing we're going to do is actually go to a little bit beyond our first keyframe to when Anivia spawns in. Then we're going to use her as kind of the reference point for our depth of field. So again, gonna make sure depth of field debug is on, and it already looks like we're pretty much in focus here. looks like our distance is pretty well set, uh, but hypothetically it's not, so let's just change this around a little bit. There you go. Let's say that this is like this and it's super far, something jank. Um, so we just need to adjust these things to get them all in the center. So my goal is to kind of get the platform in the center, but then these kind of more faded out, and then the background be white completely. So the mid looks like actually we're kind of there already. The far is way too far, so we're going to do about 3,000. The mid actually, let's just change up a little bit. Let's make it 800, maybe 900. That way it fits there. That way we can change the width to be about 1,000. And that way, this whole platform's in focus. And let's just play around with the rest of the sequence. Let's see, or actually, before we do that, we actually have to keyframe it. So put these keyframes down. Let's move them to the beginning. Let's reset those. Do this and remove them to the beginning of our move. Right about here will be fine. Let's play our sequence and see if that worked. It may take you a couple tries, but once you get it right, you can see how everybody like stays in focus. Even Warwick, who's jumping in here, stays in focus as he jumps in. That's mainly because we have the depth of field immediately like in the center. But let's take a look at this move with the depth of field debug off and see if we can do anything else to it. One more time. Nope, everyone else is in focus. Looks pretty good. Again, if they're out of focus, you can just go to your next keyframe and then adjust the focus the same way we did for the first time. So now that we like our shot, we got to export it out. Um, so first things first, we actually got to go back to the visibility menu and make sure we turn off this UI. Otherwise, it will render out with the rest of the shot. We can also toggle on Fog of War or toggle it off. I kind of like it right now. It seems like in the larger scheme of things, it looks like kind of shadowy and draws your eye away from the platform. So I'm going to keep it on. But, you know, preference, turn it off or on, depending. Everything else on the visibility menu looks good, so we're going to go ahead and minimize that. And rendering we don't really need anymore either, so we're going to minimize that too. We're pretty much set now to go to the recording tab. As you can see here, we have a couple options. First, we can like show what exactly we want to render it out as. Our options currently are WebM or PNG. With League Director's API, you can actually add your own codecs of whatever you want to render out as. But for right now, we only have these two, so we're going to stick with WebM. Then we get to choose our start time and end time. Now, going back to our timeline, it looks like our start time, our first keyframe, is about 3 seconds, and our last one is a little bit under 7. So we can go ahead and just type that in for 3 and for 7. Lastly, frames per second. We don't want 0 frames per second because that wouldn't give us much of a good video. Let's go ahead and type in 60. You can do any number here, and League Director will take its time to render. So keep that in mind. Right now, we don't need lossless encoding. I don't think it's a really simple shot. We don't 100% need that. And our output directory looks good. It's going to the default League Director one, but you can set that to be whatever you want. Once we're good, there's two things. We can either click record sequence to record the sequence, or we can click record just to record this screen right here. Just to be safe, I'm going to go ahead and make sure my sequence is applied before hitting record. Once it's done, you can go ahead and retrieve it from this folder, and then you're good to go. Anyway, so that was our first camera move in League Director. I think later on, maybe next week, I'll try and see if I can get us more of a dynamic shot of something similar to what we do in our trailers or our spotlights. But for right now, this is a good starting point. I would say go out, play around with it, and see what you guys can make. If you have any questions or anything, my team's going to be available in the AMA, as well as I'm available on Twitter anytime. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.